Hello everyone, I'm Brior and welcome back to Goodgame Empire. Today, we're talking about the various ways Goodgame Studios convinces you to spend money on the game. But first, if I asked you to tell me about the kinds of jobs people have at Goodgame Studios, you would probably think of things like artist, game designer, programmer, community manager, or customer support representative. In other words, you'd think first about the kinds of jobs that are actively engaged in developing the game, or which at least are community-facing. I would hazard to guess that you would be less likely to think about job titles like monetization analyst or live operations manager. But those jobs are actually very important at the company. It's Goodgame Studios' business side, the people who track player behavior and figure out what to sell them and new ways to do it. How do we know that these roles exist at Goodgame Studios? Well, I've seen the occasional job posting, and around the time of Empire's 10th anniversary, Goodgame Studios published a number of video interviews with its employees. One of them, Volker, was a monetization analyst. The interview is not in-depth by any means, but I'll link to it in the description if that sounds like something you'd like to check out. What all of this underscores is perhaps the obvious, just how important it is to Goodgame Studios to figure out ways to get you to spend money on the game. I recently ran a poll on my community tab in which I asked respondents how much money they had spent on Goodgame Empire in total. 15% of respondents indicated that they had spent more than $1,000, or the equivalent in their regional currency. That's a lot of money to spend on an online free-to-play browser game, but I wasn't surprised. In fact, these responses are consistent with data that was already available as part of the financial reports of the Stillfront Group, the company that owns Goodgame Studios. I spoke about that data at length in a previous video, which I'll link to in the description as well, but we have data from Q1 of 2017 to Q3 of 2019, indicating that, of the players who spent money on the game, the average monthly spend was between $65 and $86. And you can kind of see how this happens, right? You've got anywhere from $20 to $30 per month on the various subscriptions, and then if you're buying a small package each time an event runs, that's already going to put you around those numbers. Something I see from time to time, as will say a prominent member of the Goodgame Empire community, is players expressing a certain dissatisfaction with their own spending habits on the game. Nobody's ever like, wow, I just spent $1,500 to get those gold turtle hut decorations, which are now obsolete. I'm so happy with my purchase. Obviously, there's a certain sense of negativity and pessimism around the game in general, but given this background, might it make sense for us to pause for a moment of reflection and to figure out how Goodgame Studios actually does this? How do they get us all to spend X amount of money on the game? Partly, it's just by developing a game that we all want to play. But I would submit to you that Goodgame Studios, as a major free-to-play developer, is also keenly aware of the psychological tricks and influences that can get people to spend money. I've collected a list of 19 of these techniques. I'd like to go through each one of them with you, briefly talk about what it is, and then point out how it's been implemented in the game. I'll use a variety of examples from all points over the course of Empire's history. We'll see times that Goodgame Studios used a particular technique, either intentionally or otherwise, both effectively and not so effectively. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, stick around. You're already in the right place. Strategy number 1 is price shrouding. Price shrouding is almost universal in free-to-play games. It's what happens when a developer takes active steps to conceal the real-world price of an in-game item. This is the reason for there to be rubies at all. Think about it. Why not just have players buy, say, a bakery or stables upgrade directly with cash? Well, by denying the player a clear sense of what the upgrade will actually cost them, developers make it more difficult for the player to make a rational decision about whether to buy. The player is left more likely to act on their emotional impulse. You've probably noticed that rubies aren't sold in round numbers, and building upgrades and in-game items usually cost a different number of rubies than the player can buy in any single package. By preventing these numbers from ever aligning, Goodgame Studios thwarts easy translation, so to speak. To see price shrouding at work, let's engage in a quick exercise. I'm guessing that if you're watching this video right now, at some point, you have built and fully upgraded a bakery in Goodgame Empire. How much do you think that cost in real-world money? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Would it help if I told you that the total ruby cost for a level 8 bakery is 65,500? If we actually attempt to calculate the cost, you'll see that several assumptions are necessary. Let's start by going over to the shop, clicking on the Rubies tab, and looking here, where you can see that, ignoring the sale that's currently running, Goodgame Studios is selling 6,500 rubies for a price of $5.49. That works out to 1,184 rubies for your dollar. Of course, you and I know that no Empire player is going to buy rubies when a sale isn't running, partly because a sale is always running. If we assume that the player is purchasing rubies with a 200% bonus active, that probably gets us closer to the real price, where the player is getting about 3,550 rubies per dollar. In that case, at 65,500 rubies, a fully upgraded bakery works out to $18.45. That's actually less than what I expected it would be, and maybe it just illustrates that the bakery is an exceptionally good value. Of course, if you assume that the player is building top-level bakeries in all 7 of their castles, that price goes up to $130, and the bakery is only one of many ruby buildings that the player will need to construct. However, for purposes of this discussion, we can set all that aside. Here's the more important question. How close was your estimate? And another question, do you agree with my math? If you made assumptions different from my own, perhaps figuring that the player got a better deal by purchasing rubies through the daily bundle or by winning them at the Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence, you might have come up with a number that was very different. And since it's also possible to earn rubies in the game for free, one could argue that, technically, the bakery costs nothing. Each one of these features helps Goodgame Studios conceal the actual cost. Strategy number 2 is ego depletion. Ego depletion refers to the idea that a developer can overcome the player's willpower not to spend money by bombarding them with opportunities to do so. It's the idea that each time the player sees and closes out of an offer to buy something, that act wears down their resistance. And of course, it's easy to see how Goodgame Studios has implemented this in Empire. Just check out the offers overview, which, as we all know, is in addition to the sales icon, and the pop-ups, and the messages you get in your inbox, and so on and so forth. Strategy number 3 is illusory discomfort. When we talk about illusory discomfort, we're talking about how Goodgame Studios can create a source of frustration or annoyance in the game and then sell the player a solution. The most basic way the game implements this is in the grind. Think about it. Goodgame Empire expects players to attack thousands upon thousands of NPCs, including event targets. But the player can reduce the number of targets they need to attack to stay competitive if, for example, they purchase premium tools or a temporary event boost. Goodgame Studios has recently taken this one step further by introducing the Event Advisor, which is essentially an approved bot. For the low price of 1 token from the shop, players can automate the entire process of interacting with a given event. Goodgame Studios killed 2 birds with 1 stone with this one. They saw players spending money on prohibited third-party software and wanted to put an end to that while also redirecting money to themselves. Well played. For another, more specific example, consider the auto sale of equipment of common, rare, epic, and legendary rarity. This equipment clogs up your inventory, and it's tiresome to sell pieces one by one or even to get rid of them by forging, particularly if you are using a slower computer. After players complained, Goodgame Studios said, "We hear you. we're coming out with a solution, and it just so happens to take the form of a premium monthly subscription. Strategy number 4 is reciprocity. Reciprocity is when a developer tries to generate goodwill toward the company by giving players gifts. Think about things in Empire like vouchers or the free gifts that appear in the offers overview or the shop. Goodgame Studios sometimes also comes out with special gifts like prizes for participating in competitions or the advent calendar, or loyalty rewards offered to players who have been with the game for a long time. I guess the angle here is that the player will almost feel some subtle obligation to return the favor. Personally, I think that Goodgame Studios has their work cut out for them if they're trying to generate goodwill for the company, but hey, it sure looks like they're trying. Strategy number 5 is the loss aversion bias. The loss aversion bias is a cognitive bias where the emotional impact of a loss is felt more intensely than the joy of an equivalent gain. The typical example is finding $5 on the sidewalk versus accidentally dropping $5 and learning about it later. Apparently, the average person thinks about twice as much about the money they've lost. If you look around in Empire, you can see some attempts by Goodgame Studios to harness this principle. And of course, it could always be unintentional. But usually, this takes the form of Goodgame Studios presenting an in-game offer as if the player has already earned something and simply has to spend rubies to unlock it before it goes away. Think about those messages that you get in your inbox telling you that you have discovered some special chest. You can also take a look at the Kingdoms League. The player makes progress in the league, unlocking all these rewards, but if they don't have a seasonal pass, those rewards that they've already earned will go away. Essentially, the same thing is happening on the new server, where the player is encouraged to spend money to unlock their full progress. At the most extreme end, Goodgame Studios suggests to players that if they spend money, they will save their account and prevent it from being permanently deleted. This is maybe the ultimate attempt to harness loss aversion, and we'll circle back to it toward the end of the video. Strategy number 6 is artificial scarcity. This is one of our more straightforward concepts. Goodgame Studios can inflate the value of an in-game item by keeping it rare, and it's exceptionally easy for them to do so since none of the stuff in Empire is real. It's just ones and zeros on Goodgame Empire server or pixels on your screen. I think of things like the old Super Commanders, which were obtainable in premium offers that only appeared for players who were already top spenders. Or, for a more recent example, consider the seasonal decorations, like this here Exalted Easter Park. Whenever these things are on sale, Goodgame Studios make sure to emphasize how exclusive and time-limited they are. Sometimes players actually get upset at Goodgame Studios for later offering something too frequently or for being too quick to replace it with something stronger. I'm going to put this next thing into the artificial scarcity bucket, but you can let me know if you think it's actually something else entirely. Nearly 2 years ago, I made a video about these two offers, which had appeared in the shop for that Exalted Easter Park I just mentioned. Ordinarily, one might expect Goodgame Studios to incentivize the player to purchase the more expensive package by making it a better value. Here, though, the smaller offer is clearly the better deal. That same $880 could buy you 16 Exalted Easter Parks if you just kept purchasing the smaller package. Maybe Volker from the beginning of the video just screwed up. Or maybe, and here's where we go off the deep end, Goodgame Studios did this on purpose. You see, they're not seriously expecting that you'll buy the $880 package. Rather, the purpose of that package is to cause you to think that the $55 package is a great deal. In reality, the Exalted Easter Park only has the value that you assign it. But Goodgame Studios may be trying to anchor your perception, so to speak, by implying that someone else would spend considerably more. Strategy number 7 is randomized rewards. In prior videos, I've referred to features like the Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence as gambling. I've done so because players spend money without actually knowing what they're going to get. I've had pushback in the comments from players arguing that it's not gambling because at least you know you're going to get something. That debate aside, there's no question that Empire is packed with features that capitalize on the inherent excitement of being just one spin away from a major score. The Wheel of Unimaginable Affluence is the most obvious example, but Empire now also has General's offerings, mystery boxes, and the fortune teller. These features quite literally have fancy animations and flashing lights, just like in a casino. They've always struck me as being a poor fit for a strategy game where players are supposed to plan around how they're going to build up their account. But alas, they are a major source of fun for many players and an incredible source of profit for Goodgame Studios. One aspect of the wheel that I've always found amusing is that when the player wins a jackpot, they're shown 3 prizes, which they then blindly select from. We know the outcome is predetermined. If you disconnect from the game at any time after clicking that initial spin button, the prize will still end up in your account. The only function of this feature, then, is to tease the player and to cause them to think they were oh so close to winning the rubies. Really, just one spin away. Strategy number 8 is social achievement. Everything we do in Empire takes place in the context of the community. Players live out their fantasies of being an alliance leader, or a war marshal, or, ideally, the strongest player on their server. And players like to appear mighty, even wealthy. When you look at another player's castle, you're likely to notice if it's full of premium decorations. In the old days, you would notice if the player had bought the King's Banner or had a fancy Castellan look. There's another angle to social achievement as well. Players will gauge their progress relative to others. If enough top players are spending money, they'll exert pressure on others to do the same. Maybe you've heard the expression, keeping up with the Joneses, that family in the neighborhood that just bought that new effect decoration. Sports car. Excuse me, not sure how that got in there. In any event, Goodgame Studios benefits both ways from making it obvious when players are spending money. When you see that other players have spent money, it not only exerts pressure on you to do so as well, to keep up with them, it signals that spending money on games like Empire is socially acceptable. If you're like me, you remember the version of Empire from before might points were even a thing. It was somewhat more difficult to tell when a player had spent money. Nowadays, you can simply go to the rankings and tell with relative certainty when a player has bought a big package of troops. Strategy number 9 is peer pressure. This is a closely related concept, but here we're talking about anything in the game that makes players feel as if they have to pitch in to be a team player. The 2 most obvious examples I can think of are gifts and alliance subscriptions. The gift system in Empire isn't used much. Just in case anyone is confused, we're talking about those packs of, say, 30 cast iron mantlets that you can't use yourself, but you can give to another player. I think this system failed because for a long time, Goodgame Studios made it easy to earn gifts by participating in the events. It certainly wasn't obvious that if you received a gift, someone else had spent actual money to help your account. If you knew they had, though, would you feel an obligation to return the favor? What about if 9 of your alliance mates were spending money on the alliance subscription and it was benefiting you? And let's say that if just one more player pitched in, you could all get better benefits. Are you spending then? Strategy number 10 is visual fantasy. This is another topic that we can cross off fairly quickly. Goodgame Studios has packed Empire with subtle visual cues that reinforce the idea that the game's in-game items have inherent value. It starts, again, with rubies themselves. Why did Goodgame Studios choose rubies for their premium currency? Was it perhaps because they are valuable objects in the real world? Likewise, effect decorations, premium equipment, and ruby buildings are meant to look powerful, not only to convey practical information, but also to signal their value and to allow players to live out a fantasy of being a mighty user on their server. Am I overthinking this? Probably, but the effect on the player is the same. And if you look at other free-to-play games, premium currencies are very often gems, precious metals, or something else associated with wealth. Strategy number 11 is the sunk cost effect. Once you've been playing Empire for a while, you'll probably want to spend money just so that you can continue enjoying the time and effort you've already put into the game, not to mention any previous purchases. As regular viewers of the channel will know, I recently made a series of videos tracking every update to the game from 2011 until 2024. I seem to have drifted away from making the planned epilogue to that series, but I was planning to share with you my deepest held conspiracy theory about the game. Are you ready? If you go back to the early game, you can see that it isn't monetized very much. One might think that the increasing monetization in Empire over time was just a matter of Goodgame Studios getting its act together and brainstorming on essentially all of the items that we have covered and that we're going to cover on this list. But I think it's worse than that. I think Goodgame Studios purposefully kept monetization to a minimum in the early years of Empire because that's when they needed to grow a player base. It was only after Goodgame Studios got their hook into a critical mass of players that they turned up the heat. Think about it. Once you've been playing a game for 2 or 3 years, $300 Super Commanders start looking like a reasonable purchase. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, the sunk cost effect at work. Here's another example for you. Even after I stopped playing Empire seriously, which was in 2019, I spent money on the game just in order to have rubies to buy protection mode, so that my account wouldn't fall into disrepair. Now, I'm perhaps a special case since I did that partly so I could keep making videos. But even though I wasn't sure that I would ever return to Empire, it was the fact that I didn't want my prior time, effort, and money to go to waste that put that $50 in Goodgame Studios' account. Strategy number 12 is FOMO. FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is the psychological mechanism Goodgame Studios is attempting to use when it creates time-limited offers or events. I think about the Black Friday sales, or again, the Easter decoration. But we also see this on a day-to-day basis in the game. If you don't log in and hit at least a few samurai camps, for example, you're going to miss out on those rewards and the ability to buy construction and upgrade tokens from the event vendor. Having missed out on a lot of things over the years, I never got my loyalty decorations, for example, nor was I around back in November when Goodgame Studios ran its super special loyalty appreciation sale. I can say with confidence that it will be all right if you happen to let something go in Empire. Strategy number 13 is PvP. You might say that PvP isn't a psychological mechanism, it's simply a game feature. And sure, I would agree with you. But I think that PvP is worth including on this list because it sure has made a lot of money for Goodgame Studios over the years. There are unique emotions involved when a player is being attacked and has to defend their honor or their alliance property. And obviously, players are always after impressive battle reports to share on the forums or Discord. I'm hard-pressed to think of a stronger motivation to purchase that equipment set or those troops than avoiding defeat in battle. Back in what some of you consider to be the golden age of my YouTube channel, I used to make videos about the United States server war, which was between two powerful alliances, the Kingdom of Neph and the Misk. Yours truly was on both sides, albeit at different times. The Misk did eventually win, but the true winner was Goodgame Studios. Millions must have been spent to fight that war. Strategy number 14, the first hit is free. Often, free-to-play games like Empire start with a burst of excitement. The player is allowed to quickly build a castle, amass an army, get seemingly great equipment, and make their first successful attack. We can see something like this in Empire. The first few buildings are completed almost instantly, as is initial recruitment and tool production. Then, once the developer has shown the player that the game can be fun, he can go back to that idea of illusory discomfort and artificially slow things down. All of a sudden, it takes 3 hours to build that farmhouse, then 3 days to upgrade that granary, then a third of a year to build a level 8 keep. But don't worry, Empire can still move quickly and keep being fun, so long as you spend money. Admittedly, Empire does not do this as well as other games, at least at the start. But Goodgame Studios is giving out free hits all the time. Think about those 15 free Affluence tickets you recently got from the shop. Didn't that remind you that spinning the wheel of unimaginable affluence is fun? Here's a more focused example. Recently, Goodgame Studios came out with an actually pretty excellent event called the Rift Raid. I plan to make a video about it, and I think Dutch Isle, among other creators, has already given it a positive review. With this new event came several new, specialized equipment sets. For those who didn't play back in the day when unique or red equipment was best in game, part of the appeal was for the player to collect the whole set. Here, I think Goodgame Studios was awfully clever to give players a fair amount of free currency when the event first launched. Players spent that currency opening mystery boxes and getting some of this unique equipment, but never the full set. Suddenly, that equipment set that I had no interest in starting was something I felt compelled to complete, all because I drew the first 3 or 4 pieces for free. And plenty of players have now spent substantial money on this event to make that happen. Strategy number 15 is the variable reward schedule. There's so much going on in Empire nowadays that when you play the game, rewards come at you from left and right. Oh, the Storm Island's just finished, and I got construction tokens and some new decoration. Meanwhile, I'm collecting enough gold pieces to buy some build item at the Master Blacksmith, and suddenly a mystery box is ready to be opened, and now it's time for my free draws at the General's Inn. All of this creates a sensation of always being just about to achieve something, such that it is worthwhile for you to spend 5 more minutes that evening on the game. Goodgame Studios cultivates this effect by having overlapping events and making them all time-sensitive, like we talked about earlier. This is Goodgame Studios' long play. It doesn't necessarily drive players to the shop right away, but it's part of what keeps them hooked. Strategy number 16. Parasocial relationships. This is another one that Goodgame Studios can't immediately cash in on, but it's important for player retention. As you play the game, you're likely to meet other people, such as the players you're working with in your alliance. If you join a more serious alliance, perhaps they're using Discord or, in the old days, Skype, so you're talking to them even outside of the game environment. Or maybe you feel connected to the Empire community in a more abstract way, such as when you listen to a YouTube video by someone who surely is your friend. And while relationships in or around Empire aren't a full substitute for an actual real-life friendship, they can serve to create a deep emotional attachment to the game. When I think about my best memories from playing Empire, I think about my old alliance mates and working together in mass attacks. At some point, the parasocial relationship effect can actually be a barrier to getting back into the game, because you know that the players you played with are no longer active, or in some cases, no longer active in real life, so to speak. Strategy number 17 is lowering the barrier. Here's a simple truism. Players will spend more on Goodgame Empire when it's easier for them to do so. I would submit to you that there are 2 types of barriers to making a payment. The first is technical. You can imagine a player who won't put in the effort to go to the Goodgame Studios payment shop, which exists outside of the game environment, and manually fill in their credit card. But they'll be quite happy to make their purchase in-game when their credit card information is saved. Or maybe we have a player who doesn't have a credit card, say because they're 13, but does have a gift card. Goodgame Studios has that player covered since payment by gift card has long been a feature you can use. I probably did it once or twice, especially if I received a gift card for something I didn't actually want. More importantly for this video, some players are likely to have an emotional reluctance to spending. Maybe, for some reason, they're simply not comfortable plopping down a large amount of money all at once. This is the rare individual who is not comfortable buying that $880 pack. Okay, I jest. Let's make it $100. No worries, says Goodgame Studios. You're free to spend just a few dollars at a time via the daily bundles, or $5 to $20 a month on recurring subscriptions. Or again, if credit cards are where you draw the line, you can use a gift card and really control your spending. Goodgame Studios has clearly flooded the player with different ways to spend money on the game, and there's something for just about everybody. We can see this especially at the very start of the game, where Goodgame Studios really ups the benefit for spending even a tiny amount of money. You get to unlock features like the Pro Mode for the Wheel of Fortune, and I think maybe one or two others, and your account is quote-unquote saved such that it will never be permanently deleted. It's that initial purchase that might be the hardest and the least likely for a player to make, hence the additional incentives. Strategy number 18, daily rewards. This is similar to the variable reward schedule point we already covered, but I wanted to specifically call out those features in the game which are designed to be habit-forming. Principally, what I have in mind is the daily login rewards, which at this point have been outdated for a decade, so they're probably not giving players much encouragement. But when these first came out, it was worth your time to simply log in. If we go back to Empire's inception, there was a system called the Sword Brothers. Essentially, you befriended other players in the game, and their level of activity gave you some sort of boost in the combat system. Today, there is essentially no documentation of how this worked, but I think that was probably also an effective approach to encourage players to log in, and it leveraged the peer pressure or team player effect we discussed earlier. Goodgame Empire also presents new players with retention incentives. Every day you log in for the first 10 days, you get a special prize. And if you can make it to level 10, and then to level 70 within certain specified times, you'll be handsomely rewarded. These additional incentives help, or at least at one time helped, Goodgame Studios bring new players into the fold, creating that baseline investment that is necessary to get them to spend. Our 19th strategy, and the final one on my list, is the fear of loss. This is a pretty similar concept to both the fear of missing out and the sunk cost fallacy, but I thought we might specifically call attention to what happens when a player tries to quit the game. If you're inactive for more than a couple of weeks, Goodgame Studios will send you an email and inform you that things are going rather poorly in your castles. Things like all of your buildings are on fire, your troops have deserted, and peasants are being eaten by rabid wolves in the street. Actually, it's been a while since I've received one of these emails, so I can't quite remember how dire they got. You can imagine that when a player who is intentionally trying to quit receives this email, they're already thinking about the perceived irreversibility of losing their account. And of course, this is a not so subtle, if perhaps fairly meek, attempt to get the player to think about the emotional investment he or she has in the game. If that's not good enough for you, at least for a long time, Goodgame Studios was willing to sweeten the deal by giving players some absolutely absurd discounts. Forget a 200% prime time. We're talking something like a 1000% prime time for somebody whose account is on the very precipice of deletion. That bakery from earlier is starting to look pretty cheap. It's possible that Goodgame Studios has gotten rid of that, since players discovered that was actually quite a good way to build up one's account. All of this is to make quitting Goodgame Empire look like some sort of mistake, rather than the final step to reclaiming your life. It's the equivalent of one of those cave diving signs, telling you to turn back or else. Whether due to these emails or otherwise, let me know if you've ever reversed course at the last minute and been pulled back into the game when you were just about to quit. Well, that's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I think it's important that we be conscious of the various ways Goodgame Studios tries to get us to spend money, so that if you do buy rubies or items in Goodgame Empire, it can be your own choice and one that you end up happy with. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like this video and subscribe to my channel for more Goodgame Empire content in the future. I've been Brior. Farewell.